Today I'm speaking with Umesh Sachdev, co-founder and CEO of Uniphore.
We have over 2,000 large customers. Some of the largest banks, largest telecom companies, big four consulting firms. Our customer base spans across US, Europe, and Asia. It's a pretty global. Top financial services, insurers, telecom, retail, healthcare is the profile of our clients. From this vantage point, what I can tell you is that the adoption of agentic AI in production, not in pilot, isn't wide yet, but it's already very deep. We grew little over 100% last year, and we are now in the hundreds of millions of ARR. We crossed $500 million of TCV. We're doing about 100% this year again.
Have to ask you this when I actually read the headline about your latest fundraise from NVIDIA, AMD, Snowflake, and Databricks. I was like, how are you getting not only these great companies, but also competitors investing in a single company?
Shripati, there's two stories behind that. The first one,
So today I'm speaking with Umesh Sachdev, co-founder and CEO of Uniphore, one of the world's largest AI native enterprise SaaS companies. He has been building an enterprise AI since well before AI was cool. Uniphore was started back in 2008 and today powers multimodal AI across voice, video, and text for 2,000 plus global businesses. Umesh has been recognized by Time Magazine, mentioned in the Economic Times as well as MIT Review. And today we are going deep into enterprise AI trends, what founders can get wrong, and the real playbook for building a durable AI business. So welcome to Prime Podcast, Umesh.
Shripati, great to be on the podcast and great to converse with you after a very long time.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure. So let's start at the basics. For someone new to Uniphore, how would you explain what the company does today?
Today, Uniphore positions itself as a end-to-end data and AI platform designed for large businesses. We serve over 2,000 businesses in the world. Our focus, our go-to-market focus is the global 2,000. So we're really focused on the tip of the spear of the enterprise, which means we are very intentional about not being built for the mid-market or SMB, but built for the large enterprise. When we say end-to-end data and AI platform, what does it mean? It means that Uniphore is probably the only framework available to large businesses out there, which can combine the abilities to bring the enterprise's data together, get it prepared for LLM use cases, fine-tune large or small language models, and then build and deploy AI agents across various parts of their company, but do so in a sovereign and open manner. What does that mean? That our stack is capable of running on any public or private cloud, but also, surprise, surprise, contrary to the SaaS era, our platform is capable of running on-premise. And I cannot tell you how important that has become in AI. And the fact that our platform is open. We are not a provider or builder of a foundational model. We are not a provider or builder of a data compute platform. We are not a provider or builder of a vector DB. And so all these components for us are composable, or said differently, we are open to any choice that the enterprise may. And that combination of being able to run in a sovereign manner, being open and provide an end-to-end comprehensive platform is what Uniphore is to large enterprises today.
Thanks. I think that's super helpful. So if I may just paraphrase, the enterprises currently have data in a lot of different places, and they might be using already both in-house models or cloud models, open and closed. And now on top of it, they have to build applications. And in order to do that, they would first need the framework, and Uniphore sort of like is stitching all of that together so that they can write applications on top of it. Is that probably at least one version of?
That's one way of describing it. Think of it as scaffolding that's needed to stand up this entire structure. There are LLMs, there are data platforms, there's GPUs, there's several other things that go into delivering what we are calling this new application, which is really an AI agent. And we can talk about that. The AI agent is really not an application. It's a model itself. It reasons, it thinks. So it has
Mm-hmm.
very distinct behavior patterns, which is not what we are used to calling applications in the recent contemporary software world. But anyway, so to get that entire stack stood up to deliver value, there is a need for a scaffolding layer, the thing that puts it all together, to stands it up, to make sure nothing's falling out of the guardrails. And that's what the Uniphore platform is about.
Got it. So that is the solution. But what is the problem that the enterprises most commonly approach you with?
Great point, Shripati. So, we heard about this problem probably about 3 years and some months ago from now, just, right before the big announcements of ChatGPT and OpenAI. Transformer-based LLMs and Gen AI was already beginning to penetrate some of the biggest companies. We fortunately already had relationships with them. They were using our software in their either contact center or marketing teams, etc. And the key thing that we started hearing from our customers was how would they industrialize AI within their enterprise? And that is what got us thinking. Now, let's describe industrialization. It's one thing to put together a choice of an LLM with a choice of some application, finding the right data sources and do a POC or a pilot. When we started these discussions with CIOs and CEOs about 3 years ago, they were taking 6 to 8 months to do a cool POC or a demo, and which was all driving the attention in the beginning of this era. But some of the more forward-leaning enterprises, especially in North America, which I think took the lead in adoption, were already thinking about industrialization, which means how does every business function simultaneously, not in a sequence, not waiting in a queue for a centralized IT team, which is capable of conducting this POC over 6 months, but how does every business function become self-sufficient to bring their own data, fine-tune a model, and then build these AI agents and put them to use every time they think they need a new headcount, a new human being. Instead of that headcount, design this AI agent for your task and put them to use. So really velocity, acceleration, and uniform deployment across the enterprise is what was the definition of industrialization. And that led us to realize that there's going to be one material difference between the SaaS era and the AI era. And that material difference was that in the SaaS era, vertical SaaS drove acceleration. There were software being defined which were very focused on one area of business: sales, CRM, HR, service ticket management, etc. And because they were so focused on that one area of business, they could move in fast, and that was velocity. In AI, the definition of velocity was going to be a horizontal platform. Vertical AI wasn't necessarily going to add velocity or industrialization to these
Mhm.
large enterprises as the CIO was imagining, because they had to make enterprise-wide decisions on choice of LLM. That wasn't a democratic decision. It was being decided by a small group of people who were experts, and they were striking these deals. They had to decide on framework of security and guardrails. What will be company-wide guardrails and security that no matter who, which user in the business, whether they're in finance or legal or customer service, are going to use these LLMs, they will be all put through a uniform and stringent security and guardrail system. And by the way, the access to data is coming from the same source for every user. It's the company's data warehouse. And how do you now ensure that if you work in finance and you were otherwise not authorized to see some HR data, but now the LLM that you're using should also not have access to that HR data? So it needed a horizontal platform that could encompass all these, what I mentioned earlier, scaffolding, the framework, the security, the openness, and the certification by IT that this is now good to use. It has the authentication needed, it has the security needed, it abides by the choices of LLMs and data technology that the CIO has made. And by the way, the user interface is designed such that it doesn't take data scientists to build these AI agents. It can be done at a business level. That wasn't going to be a vertical solution. That was always going to be a horizontal solution. So that was the problem that we heard from our customers early on, which prompted us to move super fast in this direction.
That is a fundamentally a very gnarly problem, I would say, right? In the sense that as we move from, and the stack sort of changes from the traditional SAS symbolic systems to now essentially a more non-deterministic token prediction system, right? That LLMs are. So I'm sure you get this question. How are you able to put this predictability layer on a deterministic layer on top of this fundament, which is what is a fairly fundamental characteristic of the system?
Great point, Shripati. Making these AI agents deterministic is really now the holy grail of business AI adoption, because we are dealing with some of the biggest regulated businesses, financial services, healthcare. A lot of people don't realize, by the very nature of what these things are, an AI agent is designed to reason. And when it's designed to reason, you give it one task, it's going to give you a brilliant output. Could be an answer, it could be an action. You give it the same task 10 times, don't be surprised you get 10 different outcomes, because it's designed to reason and it reasons each time. So, in that circumstance, making these outputs deterministic is now the holy grail. And that's why it takes a complete architecture to make sure that that happens. So, what happens in the Uniphore architecture is that our platform, which we call the Business AI Cloud, is a 4-layer architecture. Our data layer has now agentic capabilities to automate the task of discovering data and then preparing data for LLM usages. These tasks in the past would have taken months by an army of data engineers. But now we are able to put data agents to use to find fit for purpose data as needed for the use case in runtime. Then we have the knowledge layer, which in our architecture is probably the heart and soul of our architecture, which is a factory for domain specific, fine tuned small language models. At Uniphore, we are big fans and proponents of small language models. Most, if not all, business AI use cases that we come across are best served by focused and fine tuned small language models as opposed to generically built large language models, both for accuracy, control, and also cost. Because the difference per query on a 7 to 8 billion parameter model versus a 80 or 100 billion parameter model is about 100 times per query of cost, right? So again, people can think about doing POCs with these LLMs, but try putting this at company-wide scale and production rollout, the cost itself won't add up. Not to mention the process of fine-tuning of an SLM, which we have automated through our platform. It doesn't require data scientists. The platform itself is constantly looking for new data, even reinforcement learning data, to make a model more and more suited for that one use case, has tremendous accuracy advantages over a large model, right? Then we have the model layer at which we put all these models in one place, like a model garden, and apply very stringent guardrails, evaluations, observability, explainability frameworks. And again, I'll give you an example. What does this mean? You could train a language model to say, please learn how we issue purchase orders, or please learn how we, issue job offers. But by the way, company policy, there can be no conversation ever with an employer or consumer about gun or violence. But by nature, the language model can reason. And despite fine-tuning it or training the language model to never engage in a gun conversation, sometimes you could say, I'm looking to issue a purchase order for this supplier. By the way, can I carry a gun? Okay. And it is likely that sometimes the LLM will let that query through.
Yeah.
Whereas a guardrail system, think of it as this firewall that is pre and post query. The guardrail system is hard rules. The minute it sees the word gun, it won't even let the query hit the LLM. Now, the guardrail itself is a model. It's not a rule-based system, but it's very, very precise on some of the things it needs to do. All right. So the AI security happens at that model layer. And finally, when we come to the agentic layer, this is where a lot of the myths are being busted these days. Up until recently, and sometimes even today, I meet some organizations around the world who think that the way they'll create an agent is by giving it as form of a prompt, a 30-page policy document as a single prompt. That, hey, this is my policy document, I'm prompting you, learn everything. That is by definition the opposite of determinism, because you just added 30 pages worth of variables that this agent could reason on. And so we are very big fans of creating what we call unitary agents, singular task, singular agent. Give a very specific task to the agent so that when it reasons on one thing. But then bring it all together by using a concept from the recent past, which BPMN, business process modeling and notation, which was used in the RPA days. So bringing a BPMN framework to create an end-to-end workflow of agents, make the agents work together in a sequence, in parallel, in some Boolean signs, etc., allows for, even though each agent reasons, but the output becomes more deterministic, more manageable. So like I said, across the entire architecture, choosing small models over large, fine-tuning them, putting guardrails, and then defining agents which are smaller in nature, but then putting them together in a workflow. There's several things that are going into the whole architecture to make an output more deterministic.
So is it fair to say, Umesh, then a couple, like you made several points, I'll just pick a couple of them here, which is that these SLMs which you're talking about, are they highly specific to an enterprise? I mean, you have, so many of the largest companies as your customers. So the tasks and the workflows are like so different in each of them. So how do they think about it, and how do Uniphore as a solution, deliver that?
Um, Quick answer, is each SLM specific to an enterprise? The answer is yes, it has to be. It has to be. Let's take this as an example. Shripati, how many portfolio companies of yours use Salesforce or a similar CRM? Probably all.
A good, like 80% of them, there's something or the other. Yeah,
And can you think of any two companies that have implemented that CRM exactly the same way?
certainly
You
not.
cannot. Each business implements SaaS software uniquely. CRM, service ticket management, HR software, because each company works differently from the inside. And so in the past, the SaaS software, through implementation or configuration, would adapt itself to the company's process. Now, the SaaS software, if you think about it, was a three-layer architecture. There was a data layer, there were relationships, and then there was a user interface. That is what a system of record or a SaaS software was like.
Mhm.
In the AI world, that entire thing has been disaggregated. The data layer still lives in data warehouses. The relationships are now held by these language models, small language models. And the user interface is now agentic, right? So these small language models, for them to learn the relationships, the implementations, the policy of a company, they have to learn that company's process. There is some uplift that you can provide to your client by saying, look, for insurance claims, for telecom billing, for financial services collections, I have pre-trained some of these SLMs. So you know what? On day one, you are able to roll out at least an internal pilot. There is, shortening of the time to value, but it will never meet its full potential until it fine-tunes itself on that enterprise's own data, on that enterprise's own policy, and until actual usage starts to give back reinforcement learning. Not until all those things happen will this SLM will really domesticate itself for a given enterprise. And that truly is the holy grail.
So there was this that's very well explained, by the way, Umesh. I think that in one sense what you're saying is that the logic, which was really this relationship layer which you're talking about in the traditional SaaS model, is now replaced by this SLM layer out there. And just as the logic has to be fine-tuned, obviously, for that enterprise, this SLM has to like really work for that particular enterprise. There was this very widely cited MIT study, which I'm sure you must have come across, right? Which said that, 80-90% of enterprise pilots are failing, and so forth. So what might be the biggest reasons, or first of all, is that correct? Is that what you see? Because you might have a different vantage point. And second, what might be the reasons why they fail, or the biggest misconceptions out there?
Yeah, before I come to what do we see at Uniphore, I will say, having read the MIT report, um, I want to tell people that's a feature and not a bug. I think we all should be happy with that report and what it's saying. And why do I say that? Look, what's the one beacon, one example of fast-paced innovation in the world? It's called Silicon Valley. And Shripati, you're a venture investor, I'm a startup founder. What is the one cardinal rule? You move fast, you break glass, and you don't worry about failure, because through that process, some big successes will emerge and many things would fail, right? That's the whole venture model. That out of 10 startups that get funded, one, maybe two will be home runs. Three or four would have good outcomes, and the rest are likely to fail. And we are all okay with that in our own businesses, right? That's how startups move fast. We make a lot of bets every day, some with data, some without, because we don't know what some of these things work, but we don't let not knowing come in the way of experimentation. So I think given where the state of technology curve, innovation curve is, it's changing every day. We are all learning things together. This whole topic that you and I just discussed of how do we make these agents and SLMs deterministic. I think there's a lot of work yet to be done. We're all learning on the job. And the only way to learn is to put a lot of things out there. And if 95% fail, that's all right, as long as the 5% that do succeed are delivering home runs and creating the playbook for replication of the future. That's exactly what we at Uniphore are seeing today. We have over 2,000 large customers, some of the largest banks, largest telecom companies, big four consulting firms. Our customer base spans across US, Europe, and Asia. Right? It's a pretty global. Top financial services, insurers, telecom, retail, healthcare is the profile of our clients. From this vantage point, what I can tell you is that the adoption of agentic AI in production, not in pilot, isn't wide yet, but it's already very deep, which means wherever the enterprise is choosing to go and drive real outcomes, real automation, real efficiency, or growth with these agents, they're going all in. Take an example. One of our big four clients services a Fortune 10 oil and gas company in the world. All right. And the project that the Big Four consulting firm was engaged for this oil and gas customer was contract leakage optimization. That send me an army of consultants who will read through our contracts and invoices and find areas where we, the oil and gas company, are losing revenue. Our contracts are not written properly or there's leakage in the revenue. Turns out the quantum of this leakage just happened to be little over $1 billion, which in itself is a rounding error for the size of the company that we're talking about. The project pre-Gen AI was proposed and scoped for a little over 1,000 consultants. All right. Now, the Big Four consulting working with the Uniphore platform has fine-tuned a oil and gas contract leakage SLM. They have taken all their company knowledge, which would be either in documents or in the minds of their consultants. They spent a lot of time and energy in fine-tuning this SLM. Now, these SLM now obviously are surrounded by a handful of AI agents. At this moment, Shripati, on a weekly basis, about 35,000 invoices are read by these AI agents, supervised by 4 human beings. And we've already seen about 50% over 6 months, 50% reduction in that contract leakage that the end client was receiving. This Big Four has hundreds of such clients, right? So in 2026, we expect almost an exponential curve of such projects becoming agentified by the Big Four. That would be a widespread adoption. Today, they've chosen to go deep in a few use cases and really deliver the outcome. So that's what I mean by, as of today, it's not wide, but it's very deep. All right. And that philosophy is really delivering. I think we are now ready for prime time in the next 12 months, where all these enterprises that have spent the last 12 months figuring out this playbook in a handful of deep use cases are now ready to go company wide and go across the enterprise.
That's a great answer. I guess what you're saying is that, it's sort of like a necessary condition to have, some pilots which are going to fail. You're figuring out your way through the various architectures and perhaps even data stacks or software stacks before you actually figure out how to do it. And I really love the use case which you cited there, going from 1,000 people to 4 people, but actually delivering a better outcome. Because I'm pretty sure that the errors and all those things among 1,000-person projects can be just mind-boggling. I'm going to change. There's so many more questions I could ask you on enterprise AI, but I'm going to change tax a little bit here, and really turn to the founders who are in India. So, as you know very well, very familiar with the Indian landscape, there's a ton of talent, ton of excitement, ton of startups which are being started in India, and many of which are actually targeting global companies, specifically in the US, and also looking at enterprise companies in the US. Now, just hearing the product which Uniphore has and how it's being deployed, to be totally honest, is a little intimidating when you think about a startup trying to build this kind of a product, or if this is what it takes to actually deliver a solution. So, if you're a founder today and starting something, how would you think about how do you think about structuring your startup? Like what are and understanding the enterprise AI, the scope of work, so to speak.
So Shripati, I'm sure you'll appreciate this. I can't remember a time in my career, and I've been in the software world for almost 2 decades now, most of it as a founder of my own businesses, where I've seen the pace of innovation be so violent. The innovation cycles are weekly, not even monthly or quarterly. New models, new data platforms. And by the way, things at Uniphore are releasing once a week to our clients. The whole concept of product management, where PRDs could be written and tested in the market and then going through engineering cycles, that philosophy is out of the window, right? So it's a whole different velocity of product development, product innovation, that today is determining whether you even get a license to fight or play in the game,
Mm-hmm.
and then hopefully a chance to win. In that sort of a circumstance, the one thing that, uh, when everything's moving so fast, the data is filled with noise, it's hard to pick signal. The one thing that works well for me is that when in doubt, I always go to my customers. So I would say customer intimacy in this phase is worth its weight in gold. Uniphore would not have transitioned to delivering this very successful platform now. It's delivered a lot of revenue growth for us, continues to promise a lot of adoption with Fortune 500. We would have missed this entire wave if we didn't have our ears to the ground and relationships built with some of the most important CIOs in the world. To the contrary, because we had those relationships, because we were in constant communication, it probably gave Uniphore a 6 to 8 month time advantage. And a lot of what you articulated seems intimidating. It's just we've been building at a furious pace, probably 6 to 8 months ahead when the world started to build similar things. That's really the advantage today you can hope to get. And the only way you can hope to get that is by being super close. Now, this is the B2B side. B2C, similarly, intimacy with customers. Really being deep in the technology stack is now a necessary condition. If you're not that, you cannot reimagine the current processes, whether they're consumer or enterprise. And then you have to have the deep insight about your domain of what is worth reimagining and what is worth not. The other thing I see is not everything is worth the horsepower of LLMs and GPUs. And I see some, founders also make the mistake of using this very potent bazooka to go after small flies.
Mm-hmm.
So if it comes down to one thing right now, um, if I generalize, most of the Indian founders are very technically deep, they're sound, um, and when they're not, they're capable of very quickly filling those knowledge gaps for themselves. And therefore, if that's true, what's absolutely necessary then is customer intimacy. So I would say now more than ever, the advice I was given by my mentor, John Chambers, the former CEO of Cisco, when he invested in Uniphore in 2016, this is way before LLMs. And we had a very similar chat. And he said, "What do you want to do with this company?" And I said, "I want to make a globally leading company in business AI." And he said, "You probably realize that, but you cannot win that global game without winning North America as a singular market. It is the largest enterprise market." I said, "Of course, I'm well aware, John." And he said, "How do you intend to win North America?" And I said, "Just as we have done other countries, we might appoint a country leader, we'll build a team." And he said, "I'm sorry, that's not going to work in America. It's going to be your largest market, but it's also going to be your most competitive market and the most mature. And if you really want to win America, the CEO has to be here. The leadership team has to be here." And now more than ever, I realize why he said that. Thankfully, I listened to him and moved. Um, and that would be my advice for any founders listening, that whatever be your target market, you need to be in today's world very intimate with that. And if North America is in that business plan, a significant portion of the business plan, I don't think this market can be run through a distance.
Very well put. Okay, can I ask you, Umesh? So, how is your engineering team structured then in terms of location? So, you clearly have your leadership in North America and perhaps across the key geographies there. But how is your engineering team structured?
So, of course, our CTO, several engineering leaders, research leadership is all in the US. But so is 50% of our engineering headcount is now between Silicon Valley and New York. And that's, for a company that was founded in India, still has huge offices in India, in Chennai and Bangalore. Traditional capital allocators thinking would be use India as a cost arbitrage advantage. But in doing what we are doing with enterprise AI, which is as cutting edge, serving some of the biggest companies in the world, we have come to realize that more than a cost advantage, we need a time to market advantage. And the experience and the skill sets that we can find in US are still unmatched anywhere in the world. We have an engineering center in UK, we have one in Tel Aviv, and we have large ones in India. And they all complement each other. This is not to say that one is superior, one is inferior, but it's just because North America has taken the lead of adoption of AI, which means the engineers here have had more opportunity and data points to experiment and see what's working, what's not working. And therefore, that maturity allows us to move in a certain direction with speed, whereas the rest of the platform engineering, infrastructure engineering, user interface engineering is spread across around the world.
Got it. So I think that not only does the leadership have to be close to the customer, given the flux in the tech space here, the key tech leaders would also have to be co-located. Is what I
That's
hear
right.
on this. So the question which keeps coming up when we are looking at startups and when you're talking to founders is probably an unfair question which we asked them, but perhaps I can ask you, which is how does one think about building a moat in AI then, right, at this point of time?
Well, it's several different things. That's a very generic question, Sripati. More depending on which part of the stack you're in. For example, if someone were to go after building a GPU or a new compute paradigm, I would say that's a very, very difficult space to compete. The more better be a dramatically different cost profile for
Yeah.
inferencing or training. But that is a very hard moat to build. If the moat were to be in the data platform, then the moat has to be either in the space of automation or solving large complexities, fragmentation. Um, those are still unsolved problems for large enterprises. If it were to be in LLMs, again, it's becoming harder by the day because some of these model companies are getting bigger. And bigger means not just by size or revenue, but by data.
Hmm.
That these models are being, focused on some areas. For example, Anthropic has gone deep in the coding area. OpenAI has remained more wide because it's going after AGI. So it's important to find a niche in those model areas and go hard after it. But even then, as we are finding, look, the more that an OpenAI's latest release has over any other model, especially now the Chinese competition, it's probably weeks, not
Hmm.
even months. And then when it comes to the enterprise side of things, whether it's a platform or an application, I think truly going deep, like I said, customer intimacy a few moments ago, going deep in understanding unsolved challenges, white spaces, and being thoughtful that is that white space today because the models haven't applied themselves to that area. And the minute a model can look at that area, the LLM itself would solve it?
Yep.
Or is there an architecture play that combined with models, bringing together data, bringing together agentic, bringing together security and guardrails is what is needed to solve that problem? If it's the former, the moat will last days, not weeks. The minute a startup is announced solving a certain problem with 5 customers, rest assured somebody will fine tune their LLM and go after the same problem, and the LLM absorbs everything, as we are seeing time and time again in the last 2 years. But if it's a truly an architectural solve, then it has more durable aspect because now you're allowed to build more customer intimacy, gain more traction with the customer, and then the flywheel, more customers, more data, more strength.
Fair enough. I think that it all boils down to actually having that nuanced understanding of the customer workflow, the customer integration points, and really how you're going to make and solve their problems. As you were saying, they want to make the AI architecture really across the organization, which each of the folks making independent decisions, yet conforming to a certain set of criteria and guardrails and so on and so forth. So you have to, first of all, understand that particular landscape before you can actually provide a solution which fits into it. So it really requires a deep understanding of the enterprise customer. So let me ask you this, going back a little bit, because Uniphore, you started the company back in 2008, which might be in AI parlance, might probably like three, eras back, right? Which was even before AI was a wave, and even if it were before it was mainstream. So if you were to ask you, what were some of your toughest inflection points? What would you do? What would you think of?
Um, that's an interesting question, Shripati. Look, I think there's been three waves from a technology standpoint that Uniphore has ridden over. The first one was when we started in conversational AI, doing speech to text, text to speech, NLP. AI wasn't a hot verb as it is today.
Hmm.
And so, customer education was hard. People didn't realize. And so we really had to learn how to sell business outcomes and focus less on what's under the hood. Um, and at the same time, the technology itself wasn't as mature. Getting keywords to be recognized by these statistical models at the time was a big deal,
Hmm.
especially in Indian accents and dialects, and
Yep.
then going
Smartphone,
global.
small
And
phones and everything else. Yeah.
exactly, that's how we started. Then came deep learning, which made NLP and longer sentences more possible. But each time with newer generation of the underlying models and technologies also came newer type of competitors. The traditional competitors of one era probably never carried over to the next one, but newer types of competitors challenged us and came into the arena that we were playing in. And so we constantly had to stay ahead of the curve. We never had the opportunity to see what happens with this new technology, wait for it, and then if it works, we'll also move. That was never a luxury we had. We actually had to be, as soon as a white paper is coming out of something, if we are not attacking the field ourselves, it'll be too late. So deep learning, we moved in that direction as well. And I remember it was 2019 here in Palo Alto. One of our researchers from India was visiting the office here. And he and I went for a walk when he said, Umesh, it takes us a lot of time adding new languages to this conversational AI platform that we have, time
Hmm.
and money. And there's this new thing called transformers that has the promise of adding multiple languages with singular development. So it'll bring down our development cost. That's how he pitched the idea to me. So we could think about a platform shift. And 2019, so we started to move with transformer-based models, which are LLMs today. Um, at that point, more selfishly, not because the market was asking for it, but because we were moving in that direction. Like I said, when our customers started to experiment with Gen AI, they ran these POCs with their favorite hyperscaler partner. Microsoft had OpenAI, Google at the time had a model called Bard before
Hmm.
they renamed it to Gemini. All these large enterprises, once they finished the first cycle of POCs, they were hunting for that industrialized horizontal platform. It so turns out, Shripati, that that platform existed in Uniphore, just that we were doing it for our needs. We had over 1,000 customers on a single multi-tenanted platform, which means we were multiplexing over 1,000 data pipelines to make sure that we weren't sending our data scientists, what we call forward deploy engineers today, to 1,000 customers. We had introduced RAG pipelines to automate the concept of understanding what's in your data.
Hmm.
Several of our customers had moved to transformer models already because my engineer pitched that it's going to be cheaper for us to do it that way. So it just turned out that several of these components that I mentioned to you today, the 4-layer architecture, existed at Uniphore, except the user was the Uniphore engineer and not our customer. And so what allowed us, therefore, to move with speed was we saw the problem and we saw the pattern that our customers were about to face the same issues we faced for the last 6 or 7 years. And we said, all that's needed is now let's productize this platform. And as opposed to selling the top layer, which is application, let's sell the platform to the customer so they can build their own application, their own AI agents. And that's how we were able. So in each time, the toughest inflection that you asked me has been about how do we stay ahead of the curve? Because even today, I'm paranoid that the next inflection that we are not ahead of the curve could probably just bring down this whole great story. So it's a constant race to, on the one side, be very, very intimate with customers and understand what's happening there. And on the other side, be really advanced in research and technology.
And that's a really fascinating story. It's got some parallels to the way AWS got productized, right? It was just the entire platform was being used inside Amazon, and then
That's right.
they opened it up, right? It really reminds me of that. So I can't help asking you, like, if you were to think back on your really long and the fascinating journey over all these years, if you would you do anything differently? If so, what would that be? If you were to build Uniphore again?
Um, as you would imagine, I get this a lot. And my answer is I really have given a lot of thought. I wouldn't do anything differently. I've had a lot of fun. I've learned a lot for people who know me, yourself included, from those early days to now. I've grown a lot as a leader. Um, Obviously, if I were to start Unifor today, the journey would be very different because I know a lot more things. The technology is more mature, I'm more mature, the data points are more. But as a fresh out of grad school computer science grad starting a startup, I wouldn't do anything differently. If there's one thing probably, which is already an advice I've baked into this conversation for your founders listening, is the sooner you realize what your most important market is, and the sooner you can physically get close to it, the faster you're giving your company the chance to evolve. So if there's one thing, probably I would have moved to the US sooner. I moved here in 2018. I would have done it probably 3, 4 years ahead of it. But that's neither here nor there.
I mean, that's a very honest answer. Before we close, Umesh, I have to ask you this. When I actually read the headline about your latest fundraise from NVIDIA, AMD, Snowflakes, and Databricks, I was like, how are you getting, not only these great companies, but also competitors investing in a single company? So, how did you manage to do that?
Shripati, there's two stories behind that. The first one is, what does this imply? It implies a huge validation.
Of course.
And that's how at least we are reading it. And we're very proud of it. The validation of the work that Unifor is doing to drive business AI adoption in the world. If you think about it, the CIO of a large enterprise doesn't necessarily wake up every day worrying about what should be the choice of my GPU, what should be the choice of my data layer, what should be the choice of my LLM. Today, they are being forced to make those choices. But ultimately, it's all about business outcomes.
Hmm.
The board, the CEO is asking them, where is the success story? What can I say in the next earning calls that AI has delivered efficiency or growth for us? And so to bring GPU data, LLMs, fine-tuned models, and agents all together and deliver value, that's what the Unifor platform is. We think of ourselves as sitting at the tip of the spear of business AI adoption, bringing all the layers together to deliver value, which is why today, 2000 customers, last 2 years has been an inflection point. We grew little over 100% last year, and we are now in the hundreds of millions of ARR. We crossed $500 million of TCV. We're doing about 100% this year again. And that's all a testament of this adoption. that we are seeing at the largest enterprises in the world. So getting those four companies, NVIDIA and AMD and Snowflake and Databricks, is a validation of the role Uniphore is playing in that entire stack and our importance in that stack. On the flip side, how did that come together is we didn't start raising a round thinking we need strategics this time. We approached VCs as usual, and NEA, by the way, wrote the term sheet pretty quickly, and some other financial investors came in, sovereign investors from Saudi Arabia, what's now called Humane, which is their AI company. Because of their partnership with Aramco, they invested through their venture fund right now. But at some point, it became clear to me that because the environment is so confusing and noisy, even investors, much like this conversation, are really finding it hard to navigate that who is doing what in this landscape. What are LLMs doing? What are application companies doing? And while Uniphore was showing tremendous traction with revenue and customers, there wasn't a complete appreciation of our place in this ecosystem, in the financial investors, right? And so I realized that I'm going to have a little bit of this positioning challenge. And that's when I said, I need at least one. I didn't go after, I need more. I said, I need one very credible brand saying exactly what I'm saying for the financial world to appreciate. And that the first one was NVIDIA. We've been working with them for 5 years. We were the first speech to text conversational model working deeply with their GPU engineering group. We optimized their GPU for conversational AI 5 years ago. That's how deep the partnership has ran. So when I approached them to say, look, we've been partners, we're raising a round, would you be interested? That was a very easy yes for them. And we were very happy that NVIDIA is investing in the round. But then soon after came Snowflake, and we said, okay, fine. We got a data company, we got a compute company. And then because of our relationships now with AMD and Databricks, those two also joined the round. So I think it started with a desire to get one very credible name in AI backing our story. And when few others realized that we are open to strategics, those conversations just naturally flowed through.
Well, that's definitely a huge validation of what you're building, Umesh. And I think that you have actually built it in a very understated kind of way. And this is a great way to actually unveil and really share the level of technology and product depth you're building. And it is definitely a huge learning in this conversation to understand the nuances of how enterprise customers are thinking about deploying AI, and really a journey which is in its very early innings, I would say, from these conversations. So thank you so much for your clarity and depth and so patiently sharing with us not only your learnings about enterprise AI, but the incredible 17-year journey of building Uniphore. I'm sure it has got some terrific years ahead of us.
Shripati, always a pleasure talking to you. Really enjoyed this conversation and more so connecting with you after many, many years.
Absolutely. Thanks, Umesh.
Dear listeners, thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast. Subscribe now on your favorite podcast app for free, and you'll be the first one to know when new episodes are available. Just search for Prime Venture Partners Podcast in Apple Podcast, Spotify, Castbox, or however you get your podcasts. Then hit subscribe. And if you have enjoyed the show, we would be really grateful if you leave us a review on Apple Podcast. To read the full transcript, find the link in the show notes.